Sonic the Hedgehog. This just in, Sonic the Hedgehog was mentioned. Hide your children immediately. Now, without a doubt, Sonic is a controversial franchise, and not in the Minecraft YouTuber sense of controversial.
Man, it doesn't matter if you 15, my nigga.
But I mean more so that, well, his track record through games isn't the most consistent compared to, let's say, Mario or PUBG. But despite all these things working against him, Sonic remains much beloved by a very, very cult following, for better or for worse. And I'm one of those certified virgins who has grown up with the Blue Bastard. My first Sonic game ever also being the best Sonic game ever, Sonic Unleashed. And look, I'm not gonna harp on about the review scores and the Sonic didn't have the smoothest transition to 3D bullshit that very credible publications have shut out for years. No. Today, I want to talk about probably the most consistent part of the Sonic series and something I think even most detractors of Sonic the Hedgehog can agree on also. The music of the Sonic series. See what I mean? Ever since his very first outing in the original Sega Genesis title, Sonic consistently has shown that the fucking sound designers have been cooking since '91. And I kinda want to go over the rich history of Sonic's various OSTs. By no means is this video really in-depth or comprehensive, but I want it to be a starting point for people looking to research this type of stuff about Sonic's deep music lore, or hell, even fucking play a Sonic game for the first time, I don't know. This video will be split into subsequent eras for music analysis, where I will be paraphrasing a lot, if not directly, from Wikipedia articles, interviews, blah blah blah, and I'll be brushing over a lot of the history for the music production for the notable games in this era, so no spin-offs like Sonic fucking Pinball. So without further ado, let's get into it. The debut of Sonic begins with, well, Sonic the Hedgehog, very riveting, I know. And the music in this game needs no introduction. It became almost instantly iconic in the series and across the gaming industry, with Green Hill Zone's theme becoming a staple of the series. For better or for worse, but the sheer amount of bangers doesn't stop at simply the first zone, but the rest of the game does. We have the more slower pace but almost mystical vibes from Marble Zone, which reflects the more methodical gameplay from its respective area. Springyard Zone, which almost feels sort of like, I don't know, bouncy carnival music, which suits the zone's name. It's a bit of a prelude to Casino Nights and Carnival Night from Sonic 2 and 3 respectively. Labyrinth Zone sounding almost old and archaic, but it's probably one of my favourite tracks from the first game. Same can't be said about the actual levels though. Starlight Zone being a favourite of mine, which has a more sombre and chill tone, which greatly lends to the zone's nighttime city aesthetic. And lastly, Scrap Brain Zone, which has almost this dire and imposing tone to reflect it being the final level of the game before you face off against Dr. Robotnik, with this almost techno vibe with these drum bits to it, perfectly suiting the factory theming of Scrap Brain Zone. Then we have other iconic little miscellaneous tracks like the boss theme, the Act Clear theme, and going back to Labyrinth Zone, the Drowning theme. Sonic 1's soundtrack almost certainly helped in its success, all in no small part to lead composer Nakamura Masato, member of the J-pop band Dreams Come True, who was enlisted by Sega in 1990 to help compose the first game's soundtrack. In an interview with publicist Billboard, Nakamura recounts working on these games' original OST back during its development, and with all the limited hardware of the Sega Genesis sound chip. From a vertical standpoint, only 6 notes could be played together, including the drums, chords, and melody. It wasn't about chords anymore, it was about expressing the music with just those 6 notes. So I only used 6 notes when composing on MIDI. I allotted 2 notes to the hi-hat and the kick, 1/3 to the melody, and used the remaining 3 to generate chords. It probably seems restrictive now, but that was just the given at the time. So I worked on the assumption that the game music could only generate 6 notes. I created it purely from that point of view, of this is all I can really use. So the challenge was how good the music could be with just a good melody, a good bass line, and a minimum of drums. After Sonic 1 had launched to critical acclaim, Nakamura would be asked to compose the subsequent sequel of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 the following year. Sonic 2 is pretty much better than Sonic 1 in every way. Almost every way! And Nakamura returns to compose this one as well. And despite how good the previous soundtrack for Sonic 1 was, Sonic 2 blows it almost completely out of the water. A lot more bangers in this compared to Sonic 1, which makes sense given more zones overall compared to Sonic 1, and they're all fully original zones to boot. Chemical Plant is probably the first what comes to mind when someone thinks of Sonic 2 and its music, and the theme of it is just so mwah, perfect. Not to mention the other really good zone themes as well, like Casino Night, Oil Ocean, Emerald Hill, What If Ruin, and etc. Each team complemented their zones perfectly, like Mystic K's music feeling, well, pretty mystic, feeling as if you're exploring an actual underground cave, if that makes really any sense, while also suiting the fast pace of Sonic 2's gameplay. And the final boss theme, such a climactic and tense sounding theme as Sonic deals it out with the Death Egg robot and Zero Rings, perfectly encapsulating the life and death feeling that the battle holds, the limited but iconic sound fonts of the Genesis. When Nakamura returned for the sequel, he only had concept art to go off of from Sega. He treated composing for Sonic 2, quote-unquote, like a movie, and took into account the visual aesthetics of the zones and reflected them in the game's tracks. Sega of America was originally going to compose the music in-house, but Sega rejected it after it was, quote, so awful that they had to rehire Nakamura. Sadly, he did not return to compose Sonic 3 and Knuckles, over him wishing to be paid more for his work due to the immense newfound popularity of the Sonic series, in which Sega unfortunately parted ways with him. And thus, we get into Sonic 3's music production history, and dear God, is it strange. Now, very infamously, Sonic 3's music remains a massive debacle in the Sonic and gaming communities at large, and that is due to it being partially composed by Michael Jackson, who later went uncredited for his work amidst various allegations and charges that came out against him during the game's development. Which also leads into why the old PC port and subsequent ports of Sonic 3 in the Origins collection has changed the music for Ice Cap, Carnival Night, and Launch Base Zone. The rest of the soundtrack was helmed by all of these fine gentlemen here from Sega, who all lended their talent to making some of the best tracks in the classic Sonic era. There is an amazing video by the D-Pad going into MJ's involvement in the soundtrack, which is highly recommended by me. And I also think you should check out Alex Yard's Sonic 3 music video series, which goes very in depth with the tracks of Sonic 3's music theory elements, which I can't pretend I'm too knowledgeable of because I'm a fucking dumb idiot. Also, finally, before I end my tangent and actually talk about the soundtrack, I will get flamed for not covering this, but you should seriously look up music comparisons between some of the Sonic 3 songs and some of Michael Jackson's music. If you don't already know that some of the tracks from Sonic 3 are sampled from his music, then oh boy, you are in for a treat. Regardless, I'm going to be strictly talking about the original release of the third game's OST, which, controversial take here, is definitely the best game in the classic trilogy, and probably has my favourite songs from the classic trilogy, being Ice Cap and Sandopolis. I don't know why, I just really like them. But it's so neck and neck between every other zone in the game. That's just how good the game's OST is, honestly. One great thing about the third game's music is that each track perfectly suits their respective zone. Like, Angel Island is tropical, has these tropical instruments, but when it gets lit on fire, it's more urgent, but still retains the same tropical sounding instruments. Hydrocity sounding very much like it would be a water level. I don't really know how to describe it, because I'm not a music theory nerd, but if you ask any Sonic player to envision music for a water level, it's either Labyrinth Zone or Hydrocity that they end up thinking of. Marble Garden sounds like it's a pilgrimage through a rainforest or woodlands, which complements the visual theming of the level, and, you know, it's a marble garden. Carnival Night is a song! Not my favourite, but I can't deny that it perfectly suits the style. Of the level. Ice Cap is this really peaceful but adventurous sounding theme that complements the ice theming, the sled ride and eventually the trek through the caves. And Launch Base, one of the other previously mentioned Michael Jackson collab tracks, gives me the vibes like a trip through a bustling city. Mushroom Hill is this funky beat that probably sounds like it was made while on shrooms or with shrooms. Flying Battery is this dangerous trip through a massive airship filled to the brim with badniks and all this tight platforming and bottomless pits. It really makes you feel like it too. Sandopolis is desert themed, so naturally, it makes use of the desert instruments, which yeah, definitely sound like they fit the level theming. Lava Reef sounds a lot like music that could fit in a prehistoric sort of adventure, which underground volcanoes plus prehistoric does make perfect sense. Sky Sanctuary is this really serene piece that marks the nearing of the end of the journey that Sonic has been taking for this game. But it also sounds like something you would associate with an ancient floating city. And oh my god, the Death Egg theme. Need I say more? No, because I've been yapping about the classic games long enough, and I need to get to Sonic CD, so I'll get to it now. The Sonic CD soundtrack is peak. If 3 didn't exist, then this would probably be my favourite soundtrack in the classic saga. Most people know of its 2 different localized soundtracks, the one for Japan and the one for the US. And most people already probably know how fucking horrifying the US boss theme is compared to the Japanese one. But there's also lots of different changes for the tracks. The Japanese music sounding like it more fits into a Sonic game. The Japanese music sounding like it fits more into a Sonic game, but the US version sounds honestly like some music you'd hear in a 90s anime like Dragon Ball. The best part is that I think the OSTs across regions are up to choice. At least I think so. A lot of people are off-put by some of the US tracks, and I personally prefer the Japanese one. The composers for each respective regions really bring a totally unique flair and style from one another, and in most modern ports you can opt into whichever version of the soundtrack you want to use. The main reason that the 2 tracks are completely different to each other simply boils down to game marketing. Sega Japan didn't think that the Japanese soundtrack's more techno-style sounding songs would appeal to Western audiences, and therefore the soundtracks were changed over in the USA ports of the game. Strangely enough though, the PAL releases of Sonic CD would retain the Japanese soundtrack for some reason, so only the USA got the altered soundtrack. So, thank you for bearing with me for my ramblings about the classic Sonic games. This is a first-parter in a multiple video series. I don't know how long this is going to span. I was planning for this project to be way bigger, but I got so burnt out through the middle for some reason. A lot of different shit came up. But that's okay, because I'm going to come back at it with a lot more detail and effort put into any future videos. If you really want to, leave any constructive criticism in the comments. Note anything I missed. I would love to be I don't know, critiqued on this sort of thing, because it's been a while since I've like thoroughly looked at something I enjoy of this caliber. So yeah, I will see you when the next video comes out. Until then, thank you for watching. I'll see you later.